Hello, hello,
Hello, hello. Happy October 1st from Los Angeles, California.
and October 2nd from Sydney, Australia. How exciting. We're finally here.
We are a true international podcast has been launched today.
And here we go. We're going to get started. So, this is our first ever podcast where we're going to discuss a whole range of things. But, Jason, I'm going to hand over to you to get started.
Yes, thank you so much, Leanne. So, welcome to episode one of season one, um, entitled Let's Talk: Unlocking the Foundations for a Thriving Life, the Global Wellbeing Journey, 10 Dimensions for Thriving Life.
And it
Leanne?
is it is global because we're already covering two continents. I mean, this is amazing that we can do this with technology. But anyway, for those that don't know me, my name is Leanne Neal. Hello, nice to meet you.
And I'm Jason Stubers. Nice to meet everyone as well. And this is Let's Talk.
So today we're going to give you a bit of a rundown as to what to expect over the next 11 episodes, basically. So we're going to be a little bit more scripted than we normally would because there's a lot of content that we want to share with you. But after today's session, we're just going to talk. This is a
And
space. Oops, sorry. Here we
um,
go. This is a space
and
where
we
no
bring
topic is off limits at all. We're going to be going from well-being and resilience to leadership and relationships, money and mindset, and so many more topics. So sorry, Jason, I just spoke over you there, my friend.
no worries, my friend. Here at Let's Talk, we bring different perspectives, real life stories, and honest conversations. Because the things we don't often talk about often end up being the things that matter most and that we most need to talk about.
Yeah. There's lots of topics that we're going to discuss. Um, and our goal really is simple. It's to spark new ideas, to shift our mindsets, and to give you practical tools that you can use, not just in your leadership, but in your whole life.
So, whether you're tuning in to Let's Talk for true inspiration, some growth, or just a fresh perspective,
Let's talk. So, let's introduce ourselves so you know a little bit about who we are before we go into what we're going to cover. So, I am a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. I'm also a mentor and assessor. And I've been doing this for more than 25 years. I've run my own businesses and also worked in leadership roles. My background is predominantly finance, but I have a deep passion for neuroscience, which is why people do what they do, emotional intelligence, which is, learning to navigate our own space and shape the way that I work with people and that I navigate the conversations that I have on an ongoing basis. So, at my core, I believe transformation begins with awareness, self awareness, awareness of our mindset, of our emotions, and the stories that we tell ourselves, what I like to call the itty bitty shitty committee in our head. And that's why my mission really is to help people shift from freedom or from fear to freedom, from stress to clarity, and to stop playing small and actually step into who you're actually meant to be. And through coaching, mentoring, and the programs that I run through the Lighthouse House Collective, I've seen what happens firsthand when people unlock their potential, when they not step into their greatness. They not only change their own lives, but they create a ripple effect in their families, in their workplace, and their communities at large. So for me, it's not just about professional success, although that's important. It's really more about living with purpose, building true wealth, because wealth is a whole range of things, and in every sense of the word, coming alive.
thank
Jason?
you, Leanne. Um, Again, my name is Jason Stubers, based here in Los Angeles, California, and I'm the founder of the Neural Collective, where alignment meets fulfillment. I'm a certified coach through the Neural Leadership Institute. I'm also a mentor, a certified alignment practitioner dedicated to helping people build their resilience, elevate their true leadership, and to thrive with purpose. My work at the Neuro Collective integrates neuroscience, mindful performance, and fulfillment-based strategies at the core, which is grounded in my more than 20 years of work experience across the healthcare and higher education sectors. At my core, I believe leadership isn't just defined by titles and how high you are in the organization, but by your personal courage, your integrity, and the authentic connection that you show and give humans and your coworkers at your organization or your clients that you work with. That's why I create spaces where people feel seen, supported, and challenged to grow into their full potential. Let's Talk extends this mission. It's a platform for real, honest conversations that spark change, shift perspectives, and overall inspire people to live and lead with clarity and lasting impact.
Yeah, and it is that lasting impact that's so important. I'm picking up on your accent, Jason, which that's great. So why we've decided to do this together is there's a whole lot of reasons, but we've both spent years working with people, coaching people, leading people in different ways and different spaces. And the one thing that we've kept noticing was how much more powerful conversations become when different perspectives come together.
There was a helicopter that was passing by, so I didn't want to interrupt you, Leeanne.
That's
um,
okay.
that's the joy of doing a live podcast. You get all the bells and whistles with stuff. So over the next 11 episodes, which includes this episode, we will be talking about the global well-being journey. And there's 10 dimensions to the global well-being journey, which we will go through to give you a taste test of what the next 11 weeks will be.
Yeah.
And obviously, the centerfold is well-being. And before we kind of get into explaining each of the episodes and dimensions, I just wanted to mention that the United Nations, which is obviously made up of all the global countries around the world, has developed a 2030 global agenda. And within that 2030 global agenda, there is 17 sustainable development goals. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because goal number 3 focuses on healthy lives and the promotion of well-being for all ages. You will see in our channel after today's episode, there will be a link to the Sustainable Development Goals within the United Nations website. So I just wanted to make you aware that that is part of the global agenda that hopes to be accomplished in some form and fashion by 2030, so that the global community and global leaders are thinking about how do we help individuals and humanity live healthy lives and promote well-being through the cross-sectional sect of all the different age groups. So with that said, I'm going to hand it back over to Leeanne.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason. As you can see, we bring our own experiences, our passions, and our insights to this conversation. And so together we can bring more balance, different voices, and different angles. Jason has expertise in organizational stuff, whereas I'm more people centric. And the conversations that we're going to have really helps us to be more richer, actually, more relatable, and more open to discussing a whole range of stuff. So we don't just want to bring in theory or just one perspective. We really want to reflect on real life, the ups and downs, the challenges, and the breakthroughs. And doing this together, it helps us model that because we are in different countries, we're in different spaces, and we've got different environments and economies working around us. So the more that we can have these conversations, exploring these questions side by side, the better we're going to be at having a robust conversation that actually benefits many, not just one particular narrative. And that's why we knew that this partnership had to come together. Jason and I have always dreamed about having a talk show, and ta-da! Here we
Here
are.
we are.
Here we are. And the beauty of technology in today's space allows us to do this from different countries on different days of the week together. So I'm so excited about bringing this to you. And we're not just going to talk, we want you to feed in questions if you've got questions, topics that you'd like us to discuss. Please don't feel that any topic is off the table, because for us, curiosity and honesty is really just the starting point where we can create a space for transformation for everybody. And with that being said, let's talk.
All right. So let's talk about the 10 dimensions of well-being for the global well-being journey. So next week, which is episode 2, on Wednesday, October 8th, live from Los Angeles, same time, and Thursday, October 9th, live from Sydney, Australia at the same time, we will be talking about physical well-being. So this is dimension 1, and it will be episode 2. And it will be around fueling energy as your core foundation. And some of the elements that we'll actually talk about during this session with our guest expert, PJ Stahl, who is a kinesiologist, strengths and conditioning specialist, located here in Los Angeles, California, and has been doing this work for 20 plus years, working with incredible clients, um, as well as being featured on different TV programs that have been aired nationally and probably internationally as well. So PJ will be our guest expert next week. Leeanne and I are incredibly excited to have a sit-down chat with him next week to talk about physical well-being and the different components of fueling energy as your foundation. Some of the stuff that will be discussed next week in episode 2 will be nutrition, movement, sleep, and hydration, which are really considered the non-negotiables for sustainable energy. Now, as we promised in our promotional videos, we would bring in the neuroscience part to our conversations. In the area of physical well-being, the neuroscience says that our brains consume approximately about 20% of our daily energy. How we fuel and move our bodies directly impacts mental clarity and decision making. Think about that. Mental clarity and decision making. We will also, in our conversation with PJ, talk about stress versus recovery, the use of emotional intelligence, and how rest is as vital as physical activity. And just to give a little story, PJ is my personal trainer, and I just have had such a transformational journey with him in the time that I've been with him, and just um, really helping me to exercise correctly. Because I was one of those people who went to the gym and I just was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? But PJ just has that kind personality, but also that strictness to help you achieve your goals and to actually merge to the next level in your physical wellness. Leeanne, is there anything else that you would like to input here on physical well-being?
Yeah, physical well-being is not just about having a full-on exercise regime every week. It's about creating energy. It's the foundation piece for everything else. If we shift our physical state, our mental and emotional states shift as well. Everything is impacted. And I personally had started a journey about 80 days ago, I'll say. It's been a bit longer than that, but I started with a girlfriend of mine doing a 100-day challenge, and it was a walking challenge. Well, it wasn't actually just a walking challenge, it was a movement challenge. It was about bringing more movement into our lives. It was also about drinking water. It was about journaling. Like it was a whole mind, body, spirit kind of connection challenge that we put together. What I noticed though was that for the first week when I was walking, I was just walking and I was still in my head, right? And as Tony Robbins says, if you're in your head, you're dead, right? So my girlfriend was taking photos when she was doing her challenge and posting it. So I also decided that I wanted to do that. So I started looking for beautiful things. And on the first day, I found one flower that was beautiful. On the second day, it might have been two or three. By the time I'm walking now, I look outside and everything is beautiful. I could take photos of everything. So not only did um, my physicality change, I've got more flexibility, I feel better about myself, I've lost some kgs, which is always a good thing. But it was more about that connection to my mind, to my spirit. Like I was able to tackle much more. I was able to negotiate things. I was able to uh, stay more balanced, not get so agitated in the different juggles that we have in life, you know, whether it's parenthood or business or family life, like there's always so much going on. And I found that when I committed to this 100-day challenge, everything was impacted by it in a positive way. So it, like I say, it's not just about, you know, going to the gym every single day. It's more about connecting to yourself, feeding yourself energy, which then has a direct flow on effect to everything else around you. So that's our starting point for next week is the physical well-being. I might continue then, Jason. So the week after that, which is our session 3, we are going to be looking at emotional well-being. And this is a real sweet spot for me because it's about resilience in action. It's navigating stress and your emotions. It's about choosing right action instead of reacting. And that's what emotional regulation is really all about. It's about responding rather than that reaction state that we can go into. You might have heard of the amygdala hijack, which is our emotional seat of the brain. It kind of scans the environment multiple times a second looking for threat. It causes stress. It causes overwhelm, and it really impacts everything we do. So we are going to look at how we can stop the overwhelm in the moment, how we can use mindfulness, how we can use movement, how we can use breath work, and even just pausing and centering yourself to really turn down that emotional reaction that we can have to a multitude of things. You know, often we say emotions are bad or there's good emotions and bad emotions, but emotional intelligence is really about understanding that there is no good or bad emotion. Emotions are data. And if we can kind of listen to what that data is telling us, rather than something that we need to fix or suppress, right? How many of us are good at suppressing emotions? But the truth is, the more we push it down, the louder they get, right? The more they want to be expressed. So it's really about leaning in and listening to what they're trying to say rather than trying to fix it. And that's really what emotional maturity is. It's being able to navigate our internal state in a way that serves us, that doesn't actually stop us. So we're going to do a deep dive into what is emotional intelligence and how can we use it as a skill to navigate our chaotic lives. Let's face it, there is so much change in the world. There's so much going on. There's so much uncertainty and ambiguity. You might have heard of the term VUCA. You know, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which has us feeling brittle. We think it's incomprehensible. So we need to find ways to turn down that emotional state so we can perform at our best, regardless of what we're doing. Jason, is there anything else you want to add in about the whole emotional intelligence space?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Leanne, I think one of the things that comes up for me is reflecting back on COVID. right? And I remember going into 2020 at a holiday and housewarming party. We had to write down our word of the year. And my word of the year that year was resilience.
Mm.
And it was, you know, and when the pandemic started and kind of in this whole arena of emotional well-being, it was amazing on how much that played almost into every day um, about oh my gosh, just like we have to move everything virtually and just the speed at which that had to happen and the emotions around that and observing the emotions of colleagues and friends who, no, they were dead set on always going into the office, but they, had to learn, or faculty who never wanted to teach online and they had to teach on it. So, and just seeing on how people had to lean into that emotional well-being to feel centered or to take a step back. And just I think how that's hopefully more at the forefront of people's minds these days, as we are in like you said, very uncertain times, um and how we have to almost use that on a daily basis, or at least it seems like for me and the community that I'm around, that folks really lead into that a lot. So emotional well-being is incredibly and impeccably important.
Yeah. And I just
Yeah.
want to jump in there, Jason, because you mentioned the word resilience, and resilience is really the ability to bounce forward, right? Like to bounce forward. It's not bouncing back, but it's being able to kind of navigate what's going on and still move forward. So we're bringing the skills in so we can do that effectively. And also emotion contagion, like the emotions that we feel
Hmm.
affect and infect those around us. So we've got to be fully responsible for the emotions that we bring into the room, to how we show up, because we will directly affect everybody. That ripple effect around our emotional state is so important. Thank you, Jason. I'll hand over to you to speak about the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. So, episode 4, which will focus on dimension 3, which is around mental and intellectual well-being, and around the thriving mind in the areas of curiosity, learning, and focus. So, some of the things and elements that we'll talk about in episode 4 is that on the intellectual side, that lifelong learning keeps the brain plastic. So think of neuroplasticity and engaged. If you're not growing, your brain is dying. So it's always good to make sure that you're keeping yourself active and intellectually stimulated so that neuroplasticity just keeps on going and going, and that your brain activity really keeps at a high functioning level versus as fading into the darkness. We'll also talk about curiosity and how it's the antidote to fear and rigidity. Um, Also, when it comes to information management, and the overload that can come with that. So we got to prioritize and focus on intellectual being. So, for years we've, all heard about, time management, has always been such a big focus, right? Especially in our professional lives. But actually, in present day and in the modern business world, we actually need to focus more on attention management. Think about that. Time management versus attention management. I'll just leave that for people to noodle on. We'll also, in this episode, talk about the growth mindset as seeing challenges as opportunities to learn, um, versus, that fixed mindset that is very transactional, right? So leaning into that growth mindset and seeing how, like I said, how we can turn those challenges, those difficult points, those pain points actually into opportunities to learn and opportunities for improvement. Leanne, is there anything else you would like to add here on Dimension 3?
Oh, listen, there's so much more that I could add to dimension 3 around our mental state. I think it's what we're noticing as a global phenomenon is, mental health decline. And if we can kind of bring in elements to help people to thrive rather than just
Hmm.
survive, I think that's really the key of that conversation. It's how can we
Yeah.
use or how can we shift our perspective in a way that has us showing up and thriving rather than just surviving. And if we can improve our mental stability, our mental rigor, our mental wellness as a collective, then the flow on effect of that will be exceptional. And it's not just for adults, like you can see it in all generations. So that conversation about information overload and the impact that
Hmm.
that has on our brain, I see that in my kids, I see it in my colleagues, I see it in peers. We just don't stop. There's always stuff
Yeah.
going on. So finding time and ways to actually prioritize that attention and focus, can't wait to dive into that conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And there's going to be, a lot on like, that cognitive overload, right? And how when you have that, how it affects that mental clarity and that decision making, which we've talked about in an earlier episode that is upcoming. So super excited for that.
Mhm.
I'll turn it over to you for the next dimension.
Thank you. So the next one we're looking at dimension number 4, which will be episode number 5 on our podcast, is around spiritual well-being. And this can be kind of a bit of a tricky subject. So it's not about religion necessarily. It's more about alignment, alignment to your values, alignment to your purpose, alignment to your internal mechanisms, and alignment to a higher power if that's what you believe. So we're going to look at connecting to what matters most in that particular conversation. Because purpose-driven individuals um, achieve more. They're happier. They're more resilient. They're actually
Mhm.
working to their true north as opposed to being told, voluntold what to do all the time. They're choosing, they're volunteering to step into their why. And so
Mm.
when they do, they can endure almost anything, right? And we often look at the how. How am I going to get there without really focusing on the why is this important to me? So this spiritual well-being conversation is really going to be more about our why, really connecting to our purpose and to our compass point that leads us forward. Looking at the role of awe and wonder in giving life perspective. We can, whatever we look for is there, and whatever we focus on grows. So if we focus on what's wrong, we'll find that. But if we focus on our purpose, our vision, our why, we'll find that too. And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather live purpose driven than just kind of on the rat race, on the treadmill of life, just doing the do. So redefining purpose through life's transitions is also important because what our purpose may have been BC before children to what it is, like AC after children to what it might be in retirement, in midlife. Like there's all these transitions that we go through, and redefining our purpose at these different times can be really important. I mean, you often see mothers who fall into a heap after their children leave the house because that purpose is no longer there. And now I don't know who I am. You often see people who retire from work and then their health declines because now it's like, I don't have a purpose. I don't know what I'm working into. So we're really going to have a look at this in that spiritual well-being and connect to source, to self, and to our greatest purpose and what we're driven to do. Jason, is there anything else that you'd like to discuss in that?
Yeah, I think you brought up some really good points, Leanne, and I think episode 5 is going to be a really rich conversation. Because I even, and I won't go too much down the rabbit hole because we want to leave, a lot of this great conversation for that episode. But ever since I intentionally chose, which I always kind of have in a way, living a purposeful life, I am so much happier. But it's so easy to default back to what's familiar and what's feels safe, right? I mean, even from the neuroscience perspective, we're wired to scan for, threat and fear and, so it's that growth mindset that we were talking about. And I think that what also helped me live and in present day continue to live that purpose-driven life is intentionally always reminding myself growth mindset, Jason, because it's a habit and a skill and it's a muscle that, you have to continue to condition. Um, so that's what I wanted to add for now.
Yeah, great. I love that because you're absolutely right. You know, the brain has no interest in making us happy. All it really is interested in is keeping us safe. And if
Yeah.
we live in safety, we're living in scarcity and fear, as opposed to living in that purpose-driven environment. So I love that you brought that in. Thank you, Jason. Would you like to talk about the next topic that we'll be covering?
Yes. So episode 6, which is Dimension 5, halfway through, um, is all about thriving through meaningful connections. And I think this is important, especially in the times that we live in, having come out of, that isolation period during COVID, and really that kind of happened in stages, right? Um, so the meaningful connections, and this is something that's really close to my heart because I feel like meaningful connections is is kind of what makes it for an individual. Um, and within that, we'll talk about at at the essence, humans are wired for connection. We're not wired to be isolated, and but we're wired for that human to human connection, right? And I think that we'll see um, some powerful insights, when we get down to a further um, episode towards the end of these 10 dimension well-beings. And I think for those listening live today, I think you'll have that aha once we get there. Um, but that isolation impacts mental and physical health. And so we want to talk about how connections can do the opposite for you. Also, the importance around quality relationships versus the quantity. And I think that that's something I think with age too that we become a little bit more wise in, is that the quality of our relationships versus the quantity and how many we have and all that really rings at a deeper level. And then we'll also talk about belonging versus fitting in and how authenticity is the foundation of connection. And also in the area of resilience, giving and receiving to others on how that builds resilience and how you, Leanne, spoke earlier that resilience is bouncing forward. It's not bouncing back, but bouncing forward. But how that giving and receiving can play into that. Um, So with that, before we move on to Dimension 6, is there anything else that you would like to put into this area of interconnection well-being, Leanne?
Yeah, I think it's so important, the last topic that you made there, Jason, because we often are good at giving, but not
Hmm.
so great at receiving support. Right? Like
Yeah.
we've got a bit of pride in the mix or a bit of ego, or it's like, I'm fine, I'm good. And yet we love that feeling of being able to support others and help them, but we don't often let them get that feel good feeling of supporting us as well. So that connection piece is so important in relation to
Yeah.
that. Like the receiving is as important as the giving. And I just don't think we give it enough kudos, really. And just that whole concept about this is not a luxury, it's a
Hmm.
necessity for survival. Connection
Yep.
is a necessity. People who are connected live longer. It just is. So finding ways to connect, and we'll talk about all different ways that we can do that in that episode. So I'm quite looking forward to that, Jason.
Yeah. And I think just one last point to put on that for people to noodle about in anticipation for this episode is, when we talk about a purpose-driven life, right? How some people's life's purpose is giving.
Yeah.
And that it is so hard on the other side of the teeter-totter to receive. It's almost like they put up that mental, physical, whatever block in place. And it's amazing to observe that
Mm.
when someone's purpose is a giver and giving, whether that's to family, friends, the whole kit and caboodle. So just something for folks to kind of noodle on and think about in anticipation to episode 6. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you to talk about the next dimension, Leanne.
So episode 7, which is dimension 6. I'm getting confused with these numbers, Jace. But
Got it right.
it's only because today is episode 1, right? So it's kind
That's
of not
right.
in alignment. Anyway, it's all good. But what we're going to look at in that one is cultural well-being. And this is really about embracing the tapestry of life and of humanity. So we're going to really look at lots of big topics in this one. And I know that there's some really meaty things that we can discuss, where we actually are going to look at how understanding and appreciating diversity and how
Mhm.
much that actually enriches our worldview. How much, having that kindness and that compassion for every being that's around us is so super important. Having that curiosity space, and we've talked about curiosity on a couple of our modules already, but curiosity is kind of the cure all for so many things because it fosters empathy, it reduces bias, it has us leaning in and finding out more as opposed to being the knower and knowing everything. So the art of curiosity when it comes to this cultural well-being is going to be super important and really a deep conversation. Cultural humility, the ability to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, to actually listen, to learn, to adapt, to be non-judgmental. I mean, I often say to my kids, if you were born in a different country, would you feel the same way? And these chances are probably not. So what makes this right? Like we've got to really kind of take down some of these barriers in our thinking and our judgments and actually lean into this curious space where we can listen, learn, adapt, pivot, and build bridges, across our differences. So as opposed to standing on opposite sides of the fence, actually building these bridges that can actually bring us together. Because when we come together, it strengthens global communities. I mean, we're a global community already. We've got Australia and America in the house. But
In the
I think
house.
in the house, but there's so many, communities. So whether it's your community in your environment, in your neighborhood, in your country, across the globe, but leaning into building bridges to
Mhm.
actually ask the questions that need to be asked and to the thought of connecting. And it doesn't matter whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, whether it's female, whether it's um, you know, racism. There's a whole lot of stuff that we can bring to life in this particular conversation, which I personally am super, super excited for, because I think that all of us want to be accepted, we want to be loved, we want to feel safe, and we want to belong. So it kind of comes from our previous conversation into this one as well. There's so many things we'll discuss. I'm so excited. Jason, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, super excited about this episode too, because I think there's some big conversations to be had here, and probably an hour won't be even enough to touch the tip of the iceberg, right? So this might be an area that we bring back, into another series in 2026. Um, but what I'm really excited about this one is that, you know, living here in America, right, and Leanne, you living there in Australia, right, we can really get, I don't want to say pigeonhole, but we can get in our sphere of what cultural well-being could look like, right? Like what could that look like in the United States? What could that look like in Australia, or even just our individual cities of Los Angeles and Sydney? So I think the excitement of episode 7 is going to be looking at this at a global level and the richness of looking at it at a global level. Um, and just seeing, where the synergies are, where the differences are, where the bridges for opportunity are, and how we as global humanity can help other human beings heal in this department, not a department, but this area of life. So I'm super excited about this episode. And like I said, the hour will probably be not even enough time to touch the tip of the iceberg, but I'm super happy that we've decided to bring this into the 10 dimensions of the global journey around well-being.
Well, we are humans, having a human experience, and I think this, and we live within a culture and in area, so we need to have the conversations. And like we said earlier, right at the beginning, it's the conversations that we don't have that are the ones that matter most, and this is one of those ones that I think matter most. So, I'll hand back to you, Jason, to talk about the next one.
Yes. So episode 8, which is Dimension 7, is around occupational and professional well-being. And I think this is a super exciting topic of well-being as well, because I think this is looked at very through many different lenses through the different generations, right? I mean, I know like Gen Z, for example, is like full throttle ahead on well-being, and that they need that incorporated into their personal professional life. But a lot of baby boomers don't believe or don't feel that it's an important aspect to actually integrate into their personal and professional life, or I mean into their professional life. So with this, we want to focus on as work with purpose, finding fulfillment in what you do. And some of the areas that we'll talk about is that work, yes, it's about income, but it's more than that. So when we think about where the more is, it's in the area of identity. Like, how do you identify with work? What industries do you identify with? What brings you that full fulfillment, right? And that meaning, and how you can positively and in a value sort of way contribute to where you work and the industry that you work in. We'll also talk about the importance of being in a flow state. So, what does that mean? So, flow state means aligning your strengths and with challenges that help create engagement. So, think about that. If you could align your strengths with challenges in order to create engagement, wouldn't that be powerful? So just think about that. So we will definitely go deeper into the area of flow state. We'll also talk about the importance of boundaries, um, around creating that harmony between engagement, well-being, and all the moving parts of your life, family, friends, kids, all the et ceteras that come with that. And so boundaries will be something that we do have a nice, meaningful, and meaty conversation around. And then if you're an individual in a leadership role, now that doesn't have to mean that you're a director, you're a senior director, you're a chief, right? But a leadership role, because we're all in leadership roles, even if we don't have that title, right? That traditional title. So if you are in a leadership role, looking at the importance of coaching, which Leanne and I both do, and creating that psychological safety within the workplace, within your team, and for yourself. What does psychological safety mean to you? And what do you have to have in that area in order for you to feel psychologically safe? And the purpose and your individual purpose at work. So this will also be an amazing conversation. Who knows, we may have some guest experts on within this episode to bring in. Um, And with that, before we go on to dimension 8, is there anything that you want to add into this area, Leanne?
Yeah, there's something that you said there that I think is so important is that even if we don't have a title, we're a leader. And even if it's not at work, it's at home, it's in your community. Like we all lead, we have to start by leading ourselves first, and then we
Hmm.
lead others, right? And the other thing that you mentioned was coaching and versus leadership, because the old style of command and control leadership no longer works. So to have more of a coaching approach as a leader, and we can give you some tools and skills on that as well, like how to have better conversations, how to
Hmm.
help your team come up with their own ideas, because we know that people are more likely to follow through when the idea is theirs, when they volunteer as opposed to be voluntold. So, how can we shift those conversations in a workplace so that your
Hmm.
teams feel engaged and want to contribute more? Because we know that with organizations, the more respected I feel, the more I feel like my leader appreciates me and values me, I'm more likely to give 40% more discretionary effort in the workplace. Now think
Hmm.
about the think about the impact of that. 40% more effort from the people that you work with is phenomenal. So I can't wait to tap into that conversation as well, Jason.
Yeah, and just to close on this, I mean, I think that you brought up that really good point um, around, if you're not necessarily in a leadership role, at your place of work, you are in a leadership role at home. And I read this quote earlier today um, that says, anybody is replaceable at work, but you're not replaceable at home.
So true.
That's where your real life occurs. So, I think that's one thing to think about is, what are your leadership roles at home? And the importance that those roles play. And it doesn't, and people will say, well, I don't have kids. Well, you don't have to have kids um, to have a leadership role at home. And, so when you said that, it made me reflect a little bit on the quote that I read earlier this morning, which was when you were sleeping, actually. Morning here, middle of the night there in Sydney. So thank you for bringing that up, Leanne.
It's an important conversation to have. Thanks, Jason. I'll move into our next conversation that we're going to have, which is number 9. So, session 9, dimension 8. I think I got that right.
Yes, you did.
Very good. And this is everything to do with money. Money matters. Show me the money. Because really, it's not just about money. This is my sweet spot. I've spent years working with a finance background. And this conversation allows us to have security, choices, and freedom. And if anyone knows me well, they'll know that freedom should have been tattooed on my forehead. Like I just love the idea of freedom. And you can't have freedom without wealth. And what is wealth? It's more than just money. Like money is important, wealth is important, but it's really more about creating this freedom and this peace of mind, right? And wealth could be, we could do a whole series on that. There's emotional wealth, physical wealth, mental wealth. There's financial wealth. There's a whole lot that comes into the idea of wealth. And so what we're going to talk about is, well, what is wealth in general, and how can we kind of shift from that scarcity miser kind of mentality into more of a abundance mentality, moving from restriction to intention, right? Manifesting even. How do we look at doing that? We can look at budgeting and wealth planning. Not that I'm going to tell you what to plan or what to invest in, but definitely things to look at to get outside of the fear of, oh my God, I don't know where to go, into something more, into something, because when you've got knowledge, you can make powerful decisions. So it's really for me about education when it comes to um, financial well-being. And we will look at money mindset. We will look at um, the concept of manifestation, which is a buzzword everywhere on the internet at the moment, but it actually, there are things that we can do that does shift our attraction to money. and our inner dialogue. Like we could have competing stories in our head about money, which is why we may not have a lot of it, or that it comes easy, but it flies out the window as well. So we'll be looking at stuff like that. And so, what it's about is financial literacy, like really understanding what all of these jargon words mean in the financial sector. So you can build confidence and reduce stress and create options for yourself and lean into, oh my God, it's actually not that scary. Just a personal story. Like I bought my house, my first property by myself as a single female, and it was terrifying. And what I know, and through many years of speaking to people, whether it's in the finance game that I work in, or also in the coaching and mentoring space, is that most women, for instance, will hand over the decision making process to their husband. Everything is the husband. He'll look after the finance. He'll look after the finance. And then when these women get divorced, or if there's a significant health issue or something happens, they have no idea how to navigate that space for themselves. And it's not just women, it's, global phenomenon. But generally speaking, men seem to have more confidence around that than women do. So building that muscle for the chicks in the house, that's what I want to do because I just think if we know better, we can do better. And the other reason I think this conversation is super important is because many people get trapped in bad spaces because they don't have options to leave. And the more that we have understanding about wealth, about finance, about making decisions that matter, especially when it comes to money, the more choices and options and the less that we feel stuck in situations that aren't healthy. So this one is a, particular, uh, it has particular meaning for me because it's part of my mission really to help
Mhm.
educate the future generations around this. Anything that you want to add, Jason?
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of as you were talking about this and like around financial literacy and wealth and, all these different areas, um, and around like manifestation, right? Which is, like you said, that big buzzword all over the internet.
Everywhere,
It's everywhere, everywhere.
everywhere.
But and it's interesting, Leanne, because there's this gal, I see her ads all the time on YouTube, and she does a lot of work around, wealth and manifesting wealth and all that. And she has said several times on her ads that um what what you see in your bank account is your relationship is how you see your relationship with money. And and it's interesting, like, when you talk to financial advisors and et cetera, there's always the question of like, well, where do you want to be? Like, do you want to have financial freedom? Do you want to be able to travel more, et cetera, et cetera? And I think in reflection, there's a lot of people who are scared to have financial freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, because we've been
And
programmed, right, that money is the root of all evil, or, we've got all of this programming that sits in
yeah,
our spirit. So
yeah.
we're gonna blast through that.
Yes, yes. So looking for your insights on especially in your area and your work in finance on to have such a super rich dialogue on that. So that will be episode 9.
Mhm.
Um okay, so episode 10, getting down to the last couple on these 10 dimensions of global well-being and the journey that comes along with it is environmental well-being. And in this episode, we'll take a look about and around the spaces that we live in, right? Just not your physical home, but the environment and the larger part of of the environment and and the globe and humanity and all that. And how we look at supporting not only ourselves, but the world as a whole. So, some of the things that we'll talk about in this episode is how your individual environment or environments shape your mood, shape your habits, and your overall health. And if you think about that and take a reflection, and just kind of do an inventory, there will be some ahas, but you have to be able to be comfortable to dig deep a little bit and to be comfortable in a space that may be a little bit uncomfortable to think about, right? Um, Also, we'll talk about your physical space, how light, nature, and clutter versus calm, getting to that calm state, right? Of and how powerful that can be, but also sometimes on the insecurities and the limitations that we have within us to allow ourselves to get to that space of calm, right? So we'll have a nice conversation around that. We'll also talk about the global environment. And what does that mean? So sustainability, right? Go look at the United Nations sustainability goals. Go look at them. See what the metrics are, what the achievements are. Um, Maybe how you can get involved at the local level. So many people think that they have to get involved at the state and the regional and the national level. But what you can do in your communities in the area of sustainability is very powerful. So I encourage you, go look at those, see how you can get involved and see what resonates with you, right? We'll also talk about stewardship in the area of global environment and personal responsibility. So I think this one is going to be an amazing, rich conversation as well. And before we go on to the final dimension, Leanne, is there anything that you'd like to finish out in environmental well-being?
Yeah, I think also, Jason, you touched on it, and I just wanted to double click because I think it's important. Our internal environment shapes our external environment and vice versa, and the
Hmm.
flow on effect of that. And it's not, there's so much going on in the world, and we know that there's this big conversation. It's actually one I can't wait to dive into because I know that you've got some specific um, passion points around this particular topic, Jason, and some good research and information. So I'm looking forward to this one with you. But I might just jump into our final module for
Yes.
this series, which is session 10, session 11, dimension 10. Almost got it
Yes.
wrong again. Um, and this one's about technology, right? Technological well-being, this whole digital space that we're into. It's how can we adapt with intention and making tech a tool, not a trap. And I saw the saddest thing. I was saying to Jason earlier this week. I was driving my son to school and dropped him off. And I looked up and there were groups of kids walking together, all of them like this. So groups of them, different groups, but all of them like this, like no communication, no conversation. I was thinking about the neck issues they're going to have, the RSI that they're going to have, like all of these physical things, but the impact on their mental state as well. And it's not just kids, let's face it. I have a phone in my hand all the time doing stuff. So technology can be a servant, but unfortunately, most of us have as a master. And it's about how can we flip the script on that and actually have intentional use. A lady that I work with often says, is technology using you or are you using it? And I think it's a really interesting question to ponder because we can tell ourselves, oh, no, I'm using it. But really, are you? Or is it using you? Has it dragged you into that whole space of, the scrolling, the gaming, whatever it might be? And I'm not saying that technology is bad. Like we need it. It is the way of the future. But again, it's about this intentional use. So how can we do that well? And we talked about this earlier about managing this digital overload, like this information overload that comes in, and putting boundaries in place around that. So, whether it's boundaries around when we will respond to emails, how we manage our notifications, how we manage our social media, navigating screen time, like really setting really good boundaries for ourselves, because boundaries are really about us and what we'll do. It's not
Hmm.
about hoping somebody else will do something different. It's about this is my line in the sand, and this is what I will do around this. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation and thinking about how can I set healthy boundaries for myself so that it serves me, that technology is actually a great servant, and not the master of my time and mind. So we're going to also look at how we can use tech. Haha. So here we go, reducing it, but now we're going to use it. So there's lots of things, but using tech to enhance well-being, because there's lots of ways and lots of apps and lots of things that we can do, whether it's tracking apps or meditation apps or mindfulness apps. Like there's so many ways that we can use tech, whether it's learning platforms even, like lots of really good stuff. But again, it's intentional use of it as opposed to just the next thing and the next thing. And before you know it, you've been sitting there for an hour. So I'm looking forward to that. And the last kind of topic that we'll bring into this space is digital detox. How can we look at doing this? Like actually creating spaces for presence, spaces for offline happenings, connection. Imagine all the other things that we could do. The sad part about technology is that we're more connected physically, but because of these apps, but less connected emotionally with people, which is feeding into epidemics of all sorts of other stuff. So these digital detoxes and how we can navigate that for ourselves and what that could look like, so we can actually do the things that matter most in our lives. Anything that you'd like to add to that, Jason?
Yeah, just a couple quick things is that earlier when I said the connection and the ahas, this dimension is the one I was talking about.
Mm.
So I'll leave you with thinking of what those ahas are and the connection between those two. Um, and also too on how tech can enhance well-being. I think also too, which kind of was spoken in the digital detox, but how it can affect some of these other areas within the 10 dimensions in a negative way. So I think there's that balance, right, that has to be achieved. So I think this is going to be a super rich um, conversation, and because we all use it. You know, 4-year-olds use it to 100-year-olds use it. So I think there's some um, connection and some resonating from all the different generations into this particular area of well-being.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and with that said, those are the 10 dimensions that we will talk about, which will take us through the middle of December. Then we will have a couple holiday episodes before Christmas, Hanukkah, all those holidays, the New Year, all that happens at that time of the year. And then we'll flow right into 2026. Um, and so, with that, Leanne and I want to just take a moment to let you know what else you can expect, because today was a big information session about what these next 10 weeks are going to be about. But there's also going to be some very specific things that you're going to receive in each of our episodes. One of the things is special guest experts. We have our first one, PJ Stahl, next week for episode 2 around physical well-being. And then also book recommendations and resources. And what else can they expect?
Yeah, there'll be some top tips, like real nuggets that you can take away and implement into your life. Obviously, you're going to get to know Jason and I very well with personal stories, but we'll also possibly have others to come in and share their personal stories and their journey as well through this series and ongoing, not just this series, ongoing, because this is really about bringing to life humanity, right? And the true things that happen for all of us. And like I said right at the beginning, please do, if you've got questions that you want answered or topics that you want covered, feel free to share that with us. We would be more than happy to bring those to life as well. So we'll answer your questions. We'll talk about all the topics, and there's going to be so much more. But book recommendations is my favorite one because I read all the time. Um, so we'll go into our top tips around that as well.
Yeah, and just one anecdote or note on the questions, please pop them into our YouTube channel. Um, because we will look at the comments, we'll respond to questions that you have, and please, like and share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. With that, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us for today's conversation on unlocking the foundations for a thriving life, the global well-being journey, 10 dimensions for a thriving life.
Yeah. It's been our absolute pleasure to be here. And we do hope that it's sparking something new, right, in your thoughts. So whether it's an insight, a fresh perspective, or just even now a question that you might have that's worth exploring. That's our mission here.
Yeah. And along with our mission, which is simple, is to have the conversations that matter and to remind you you don't have to figure out all of this on your own. We are here to help you. Our special guest experts are here to help you. So don't figure you have to figure this thing called life and its complexities out on your own. We are here to help you and to be your friend along the way.
Yeah. And as Jason's already said, but I'm going to double click and say it again. If you enjoyed today's session, or if you're looking forward to something that's coming up in one of the elements that we've discussed today, please share this with your friends, subscribe, and keep the conversation going with us. We look forward to being on this journey with you because together, when we talk,
We really talk.